A good evening and welcome to the Fourth Estate. We will discuss today the stories that dominated the news week, and we have a panel of the best pundits in the week, the best journalists in the country at the moment to discuss for us these stories. And I say it, of course, we have Agatha Twaire with us, who is a journalist, and we have Becca Bate also, who is a journalist. I want to start with, we should first watch a story on the Christian lawyers reacting to what happened in the riots of this week, and then we discuss the riots of this week. So let's first watch that story and then get into the discussion.
General Eli Tumwine told journalists that armed forces are justified to shoot and kill Ugandans during demonstrations.
For police, there are procedures of how you change and heighten the levels. Police has a right to shoot you and kill you if you reach a certain level of violence. Can I repeat? Police has a right, or any situation, if you reach a certain level, they have a right to shoot you, and you'll die for jail for nothing. And I don't want you, anybody who wants to take that risk, do it at your own.
Consequently, the Uganda Christian Lawyers Fraternity joined the Catholic Lawyers Association and the Uganda Muslim Center for Justice in questioning the legality of General Tumwine's statement.
That is illegal. It is not founded under any law. The role, the duty of the police is to protect, is to safeguard, is to guarantee order.
The lawyers, who described the security minister's statement as unfounded and likely to be misinterpreted by armed forces, have appealed to Parliament and the judiciary to address themselves on the matter.
To the Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament, the Human Rights Committee should investigate the incidences with the view of holding the errant security officers accountable for the human rights abuses described above. To convene an emergency sitting of Parliament to debate and resolve on the issues of electoral processes, human rights violations amidst COVID-19 as a matter of national concern.
These are the key institutions to guarantee the rule of law in Uganda, to guarantee that the Constitution is respected, to guarantee that the sanctity of human life.
They also expressed concern at reports of the armed men who were not dressed in the gazetted uniforms of the security forces, as required by law, openly shooting at the public.
Therefore, we do condemn in the strongest terms the persons who never had uniforms carrying guns. If, for instance, another person comes another day, not uniform, and comes and robs me, how will the police run away from it that it is not them doing it? How do we expect a vulnerable person, an ordinary person, to differentiate between a robber who has a gun and he has come to rob him and a police officer who has no uniform?
The lawyers also expressed concern over the continued involvement of the army in what they called simple operations that should be handled by police.
What we normally see, the army comes in outright. Does it mean that we no longer have police? So it is illegal that the army can come in, but under what circumstances should the army always come in? So this is what we are looking for. We want to re-entrench the rule of law in Uganda. We want to see the provisions of the Constitution being respected.
Instead, the Land Friends have advised the Electoral Commission to call all stakeholders in the electoral process to address itself
to recall candidates for a candid discussion on the best way of ensuring a free, fair and health risk-free election, to take charge and provide a leveled ground for all political actors.
All Ugandans who lost their loved ones in the shooting have been offered free legal services if need arise.
Thank you so much, Aaron Mukama, for that story. Of course, that story happens within the context of the riots and protests that happened in this week when Robert Chagulanyi, the presidential candidate for National Unity Platform, was arrested in Luka. I want to start with Agatha. What exactly happened this week? I don't seem to get the sense of what happened this week from our press.
I didn't know what was happening on Wednesday. I left home and went to town on a normal day. My business was supposed to be uptown at the URSB. But in a lunchtime break, when I was asked to go back at 2, I went downtown to just pick something. And I was caught in that crossfire. And I entered the mall. Like I kept asking what has happened. But when I entered the mall, and it was locked, we were locked inside because the bullets were raging outside, right outside. That's when I went on social media and found that Honorable Chagulanyi had been arrested. So these here were quelling riots that were reacting to that. And that's what the media has reported. I don't know what more you wanted to see in the media, but that's what has been reported, and we saw that protest, those bloody riots that have claimed about 60 lives now. I could have been one of them. Like, this was my first close interface with it. So we were locked in this building downtown for 4 or 5 hours, between 1 and 5. And the police was outside trying to force them to open. Apparently, rioters were inside the building up throwing stones. That's what was. But, like, so I kept expecting that in time now I could be one of those I was seeing on social media dying. And there's one woman who looked at me and the panic has in, and she said, and she was a pregnant woman, she said, Bambo no chirawika, like, gwegusose. Now, I wondered, I don't know what was worse, what's more saddening, that now you have Ugandans use it to that terror, that every day a person leaves home to go downtown to work, and there's that fear, there's that, like, cognizance that I might not return home, and it has become, yeah, so.
Second nature.
Yeah.
Becca, what exactly happened in town? It's not every day that 58 people die, the police arrests over 500 people, puts them in cells, government ministers are on prime time making press statements. It's not every day that something like that happens.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Raymond, but it has happened, only that Uganda is such a forgetful country. I was in conversation with my senior journalist at office, and he was like, this has never happened in Uganda. And he's my senior, he started journalism probably when I was not born. But I was telling him, in my time of being a journalist, it has happened 3 times. Okay, 2 times as an aspiring journalist, and 1 time before I became a journalist. I remember in 2005, for us, we grew up in this town. This is our town. So I remember in 2005, when Vesige was arrested, when he was coming, in 2005, and we saw this for 2 days. In 2009, I was a student at Makerere. When they stopped the Katikiro from going to Kayunga, the Kayunga riots, it happened. I was still a student at Makerere, still 2009, I think, in the Masiro there, when security forces descended on unarmed people, and I was there. That particular moment I was there. I remember the president wanted to come and visit the burnt Masiro, the tombs. And the boys inside there were saying he will not come here. So what happened, the president's advance team, they came and descended on them and started shooting. 10 people also, or more than that, actually died. So I think we've been here, only that in Uganda, we have a saying in my language which goes in Ogugwateguba muka, referring to alcohol, that when it is very good, so sweet today, you will not remember it the following day. You remember that particular one. You will not remember the one which was brewed yesterday. So sometimes we tend to forget, but I think every time President Yoweri Museveni has been faced with a challenge, his reaction has been the same. So, but I don't know, what happened on that particular day, actually, I was attending a press conference at the Uganda Media Center, which was addressed by Ochom, the director for operations. He was reading a letter from the Inspector General of Police, and the letter was like, all commanders, police commanders across the country have been ordered to do everything to see that these political actors don't hold these rallies. So it happened right there, and maybe they were enforcing that particular order, which Mr. Chomo had come to read to the country, but the commanders had already got it. So what I saw after the press conference, I came to town, and with a colleague, for him, we got interested in the bullets. I said, let me first go and file this story, and we will be in touch. When I started seeing pictures he was sending, I thought it is the usual 1, 2, 3 people killed. But the extent to which
The massacre.
it is a massacre, I'm telling you. And I don't know, when you watch, I watched videos, I watched people aiming, I mean, people, some of them not even dressed in uniform, aiming directly to people, directly at people. I saw a video that, caused problems for me. A woman who was up there, and an officer shot exactly where the woman was. I was like, now what is the order? I don't know. Was the order go and do everything to put out these riots? Had the officers gone off track from what they had been told? I don't know. Problem we might never know, because what has happened, Mwenda the other day was telling me that you went and did a story in Kasese and discovered that maybe the killing was justified. But I don't want to agree. There is no justification whatsoever of killing people, more especially when they are not armed. Because if someone has a stone and you are responding to a stone with a bullet, not in the leg, because I know for a fact that if you shoot someone in the leg, you will disable them. If you've been shot in the leg, you can't throw a stone. But someone is aiming at the head. You saw a boy who had a toy gun, and someone aimed a gun to the head and killed him. So I don't know. I think if this was not intended, if there was no order that go and do everything and kill them, then we must see some heads rolling. Because if you gave them a different order and they executed a different order, then you must bring them to account. Unfortunately, history tells us that there will not be anything like that. We have seen it in Kayunga, we've seen it in Kasese, we saw it in Best Walk to Works, we saw it in Kasubi. Nothing happened, and they will be written in what is human rights books, these ones, international human rights watch, what have you, and that's where the story will end.
But there's something peculiar during the press conference, and indeed some videos that security put out. They said that the reason they carried out with such much force was because they were responding to hooligans, and they say that there was an organized attempt at burning the city by people who were carrying and ferrying tires. They say that people were actually beating up others who were dressed in different, say, in yellow attire. And that's a justification that the security minister gave at the press conference. I'm just wondering, is that justification enough for the level of force?
Two things for me. First of all, if that were true, then the people who are in charge of intelligence should be sacked immediately. Because if people plan, local people, us local people, me, I'm a local person, I'm not part of those who participated, but I'm saying local people, if they can plan and execute, they plan to burn the city and actually go ahead and participate in trying to burn the city, then those in the intelligence should be sacked immediately, and some of them should be court-martialed because they have slept on the job. But unfortunately, we've been here before. I remember in 2009 when they arrested Bet Nambos, Medad Luvega, and the Katikiro. The police came out and told us that they are recruiting rebels, and they went and took them to Bonibuja, and then they lined them up for identification. So we've been here before. They will always have a story to tell of what happened. And unfortunately, I normally look at them and I am like, do they actually believe what they are saying? Kawesa, the late Kawesa, I remember what he did. He went and lined up petrol bombs, Vijambia, what have you, that these ones were caught in the palace of the Msinga. Okay, that is still in court. But there are others for example, and what happened to them? So we've been here before. Besigye was accused of trying to overthrow the government through the PRA. How many were convicted?
Yeah, but Agatha, you have a burning response to that.
Yeah,
Yes.
as to what you said, that this was intelligence that people are planning to ban the city.
There are even videos.
My question is,
of that.
did that intelligence info come in after the arrest of Bobi Wine or before? Because we all know that the riots were in response to the arrest of their candidate or the person they support. So is it at that moment that they get to know about intel to ban the city or not? The other response or addition I wanted to give to Becca's view, Becca was asking when he saw what was happening. I saw how he looked and angry, and yeah, everyone is angry. And for me, I don't know what makes me more infuriated. Is it the actions? Is it the response you get from those people, from the president himself, from his ministers, that many people have died, 60 people. We are still counting. And among those people, you have a 72-year-old man who couldn't have been a rioter.
Sure.
You have a food vendor who was carrying food, trying to make ends meet and feed her children. You have a child. You have a pregnant woman whose legs were shattered and she later died. And you open your mouth as a leader and say they will regret why they protested, and say police has a right to kill. And I had the lawyers asking a question I've been asking myself. Why didn't General Tumine tell us what right, who or what gives police that right to kill people? Because under normal systems, I think even where police kills in self-defense or in defense of other people, those people should be brought to account to say, this is what happened, this is the force we used to respond to the force that was coming from this side, so that we understand this. But if you go killing people, and I don't want us to discuss it as a new thing. It's true that killing of people like every day will be infuriating and enraging, but Becca has stated it here. It's not the first time it has happened.
Yeah.
It's not the first time people die in campaigns. It's just that this time the deaths have started so early and the massacre have started at really an alarming rate. One wonders by the time 2 months elapse, how many Ugandans will have died. Hold on,
yes.
I have another, Becca was saying, was that what they were told to do? Was that the order? Dr. Msinja Kavumba wrote a paper in 2007 called the Illusion of the Ugandan Constitution. And he was saying that you can see some of these violence acts as mere disregard of the law, disrespect of the law. But like the frequency within which they happen and the way that the NRM government obtained power and the way it has sustained it and how far it is willing to go to keep it militates against this view, that you don't think it's one officer or two or three who have disregarded or disrespected the constitution or the laws. But this is what the NRM is about. This is what it has been about for the last 34 years. The election of 1996 was violent. We all know that. In 1996, President Museveni had been here for 10 years, alone, unfettered, like had no opponent. You would wonder what requires or forces him to go and be violent or use violence against the supporters of an opponent that really posed little threat. 2001 was like the epitome. Parliament even instituted a select committee to look into the violence. That report was never reported, but it's there, and it states how many people died, where they died. All of them. You can say maybe by so far, the election we've had that hasn't had this many, still people died, but not as many, is 2011. And you know, by 2011, I think they had changed the tact and said, let's introduce the use of money. Still, we cannot sit here and say that this is about COVID SOPs. Of the 5 elections we've had since the NRM came to power, this is the only election we've had amidst COVID. But it's not the only election we have had. People die, and people die like in things they are not even in, not even rioting, not even supporting. But even those rioting, why don't you deal with the causes of their anger rather than the result? If you have given people, you have said people should go and campaign, first of all, why did we have this election? And who pushed for it? It's the president. The opponents, the opposition people did not want this election during the pandemic. So you ask yourself why now Museveni, who is the incumbent, was the one more, worried about us having an election in this time. This is just to give him an excuse now to shoot people with an excuse of the SOPs or his army or his security. So it's really enraging. It's something that when you're talking about it and seeing other people the other side not caring, women dying, children dying, people dying, and yeah.
Thank you so much. I want us to take a very short break, but when we return, we'll discuss the press's coverage of this violence, just how much of it was covered and what was left out. Thank you so much for staying with the Fourth Estate. We're discussing the press coverage of the riots and protests that happened in the city this week. I want to start with you, Becca, now. On the coverage, there were two peculiar things that many people were looking out for. The official death toll. Who was declaring what was the official death toll? At one point, I myself was struck. There was a police pathologist speaking. There was Mulago's mortuary unit which was speaking. And then we had a police spokesperson in Fred Enanga speaking. And each of them had a different toll. What did the press do in terms of the coverage and the toll that we have currently for an official toll?
We are living under dangerous times as a press also. These days we do self-censorship more than we have ever done it, I think. When you're talking, you're like, will I survive when I'm going back home? Because you see, if someone can descend on a seat and kill 60, who are you? So I remember in the morning of Friday, I called somebody. By coincidence, I have someone at the mortuary. So I called him. How many people have died? In the morning, when people were on the morning of Thursday, I think, when they were declaring, is it 9? The papers had said 3 people had been killed. But in the morning, I called someone and told me 32. When we had, is it 9? The first toll was what? 9?
The first toll from police was 3 and
3.
then moved to 9.
Yes. So, but somebody told me they had killed 33. The issue is, Mulago, when you are killed in the field, you are directly taken to the mortuary. And then there was that batch that they were who were taken to the emergency unit at Mulago. So some of them died from there, and others died at Mulago. And there are others who are never collected. But the problem is, I don't know, even when journalists go and actually count the bodies themselves, they want to be on the safer side. A friend of mine went to CPS, to the situation room, and eavesdropped on them. And by that time on Thursday, they were saying they had 36. But the issue was, should we declare it? And one of the senior officers was like, if we declare those ones, it will cause another problem. So we are better off declaring this. But they had a problem. The pathologist, the police pathologist, Bialhanga, declared 16 who had been killed who had died bodies which had been taken to the mortuary. Yeah. So they were there. Should we say 13? Should we say 16? Should we say 9? So there was a problem. They didn't want to declare these numbers, and I am very confident. I'm sure even the figures we are getting are conservative, because there are others who died from their localities and were never collected by police or by anybody, who are never taken to the mortuary. I think the number is bigger, but where the traditional media is shivering, everyone has a smartphone now. The smartphone is doing a tremendous job, because if you are so scared to publish that they have killed how many, social media is willing to show you. Someone with a smartphone is willing to show you who has died where. That car that killed people in were in downtown there, the NRM car which they were trying to stone and it rammed into people. I saw pictures and you couldn't even eat after looking at those pictures. and I think maybe the death toll will continue to rise because there are many others who are still in hospital. But there is always a good side to everything. We normally have debates of whether social media is killing traditional media, but at least it is trying to be present where traditional media would literally be absent. And for them, they are willing to publish without those pictures of the woman who was crushed. I'm very sure NTV cannot show them, but social media is willing to show you. And another aspect to it is that we are debating with somebody. Is it that they have killed more people now, or they killed more people in Kayunga riots? Maybe they killed more during Kayunga riots, but there was no social media was there, but the extent of penetration was not as much as it is now, and the smartphone. Now, everyone is a reporter, so we are able to see, we are able to compute, we are able to get all of this because people are willing to report. Every citizens are everywhere, and everyone is willing to report what they are seeing. Maybe that's why we are seeing. Unfortunately for me, that amidst all these eyes present, because everyone has a smartphone, people in security are not even bothered that somebody is seeing. That is the impunity. Because if someone is recording you and you shoot them, you know they have recorded you, it is going to be recorded, and you have no qualms about shooting them. I don't know.
Agatha,
it's confusing.
That's the other second question, that normally the press goes out and reports on who has commanded a particular operation. For example, we know the Kayunga riots, Grace Turiagumana was the one who was commanding it at the time. And the press did a lot of work in saying, this is who commanded them. The Black Mamba, the press did a lot of work in unearthing who they were, what command positions they held. In this one, nobody seems to tell us who was the commander of the men who were on the streets. But they seem to genuinely be acting from a point of central command.
I think as in all regimes, you know, this government, most people used to call it a hybrid regime, that it has, but it has now become an outrightly militaristic regime. So like as time goes on, the fear becomes more and more. The ease and freedom with which journalists did their work 10 years ago cannot be the same now. We have seen that in how many journalists have been caught in that fire, beaten, arrested, and all that. And also, those in the system, both government and the security, are now more willing to conceal many details than before. That's why, for example, we are still struggling to know how many people have died so far, because you expect the number of people that have been murdered from the people that murdered them, because where else are you going to get like information that is that reliable? If you get from one place and another, you will still want a consolidated number from at least one body which is in charge. Now, for who is in command, still it is the police supposed to tell you. We as journalists have both formal and informal sources. We used to have days where you have those that are going undercover and investigating. For that, I can't rule it out because it is still too soon to like cultivate a source and have them confide in you to tell you that. But the former ones that we know are not going to be willing now to say that I am the one or this person is the one, because the stakes keep going higher. I think basically that's the problem now, that also we are very scared, we are fearful in our duties in executing them as journalists now than before. Baker said, you now never know whether you'll go back home. And that comes from that with 35 years, if they had started at a lower level of censorship and all that, by the time you get to 34, 35 years, it's outblown, and that causes fear. And all this is about that. The state is aimed at causing fear into the citizens. That this killing, the violence and all that, it show you that I am the one who is still here in charge, and you owe your life to me, and if I decide to take it, I will take it. And you will have a few journalists that will still do their work without that at the back of their minds. Yes.
Away from the state-sanctioned violence, there's also the violence that came from the protesters and rioters. There were videos of people being beaten by people who said they were protesters. There were videos of men carrying hammers hitting at police officers. The question then becomes, why didn't those also make it to the press? And I know that the big question is on about there seemed to be a balance of forces on each side.
A balance of forces?
That is
like
what...
of violence?
No, there seemed to be a
that
balance
is equal
of violence.
violence from
yes, and the question was, the press didn't report any of what the rioters and the protesters were doing. They rather concentrated on the state-sanctioned violence. Is that a fair critique of what the press did this week?
I don't think so. And you know, at the end of the day, I tell people that a person that taught me journalism might have taught me wrong thing, but always emphasized comfort the afflicted, afflict the comfortable. I am not going to go out and see dead bodies, 60 dead bodies shot by police, and concentrate more on who first threw a stone. Like the impact itself. And I had told you earlier that I wish as a country we should stop being hypocritical about when I hear those people saying all that of the hooliganism and stuff. Let's look at what is causing the hooliganism. This is not the first time we have had elections. But if you keep pushing people on the wall, if you keep, like, all the avenues of dissent are not there, we have courts, people have gone to courts and have gotten tired. We can give an example of Dr. Kizza Besigye and many others. We have a parliament that doesn't seem to help. We have a police that is never on the people's side. So if President Museveni sanctions violence like that and sits there and says they will regret they haven't seen anything, what do you think the person who is the victim of that violence will do? If they don't get President Museveni himself to mete out their anger against him, they will mete it out on one who is putting on a T-shirt that has President Museveni or a car. So I think whoever is saying that the press should have concentrated on how did it start, because people ordinarily have a right to protest if they haven't liked the way you are treating other people in the presidential race. So we don't know if that protest had started violently or became violent when the violence came, which is what happens all the time. We have seen those processions, we have seen walk to work, we have seen Besigye walk to work, and the violence starts when police comes in. I am not, if I am a journalist, you will call me, if I am a journalist covering that story, you will call me biased or whatever, but I'm not going to leave 2 women that have been shot in the head and go and cover who first threw a stone at a police car that resulted into that.
Becca, there seems to be a change in the way protest in Uganda is happening. Previously, there was tear gas and people would go back home. Now we have fight back, active fight back. On nomination day, at least 3 military cars were stormed at the residence of Robert Chagulanyi. In the previous protests that we've just seen now, government cars. In fact, at some point, I know that government officials were actually asked to stay put where they were, and private vehicles were picking them and taking them home. Is this an escalation? Is it something that the press should start to take notice of, that the fight back is starting to happen?
Without sounding like I am condoning anything, but there is a saying that when the birds learn to fly without perching, the shooters learn to shoot without missing. So sometimes action and reaction are equal and opposite. I'm using metaphors. But this should show those in power and comfortable that things are not moving in the direction they think they want them to move. Your friend Andrew Mwenda was saying, no, Uganda is not ready to be in the state where Sudan, where Egypt was. But I think every day you look at these riots, every day you look at what happens every time there is a problem, it tells you what you see in Kampala is a representative of the failure of Yoweri Kaguta Museveni as president. Because I'm very sure here at NTV there are people who individually, support Robert Chaguranyi Centum. And I am very sure 100% that nobody participated in that thing. No, as a rioter or as a protester, maybe as a person who had gone to cover the story. Why? Because you have a job, you have things to go back to. But you have 80% of people, young people below the age of 35, who have nothing to do. They have nothing to lose. You get? So those people are willing to do everything, and they look at and there is a connection, and no one should deceive you that there is no connection between leadership and the well-being of the people. I read a book of Why Nations Fail. Someone was comparing two places, one on the Mexican side and one on the American side. And the one on the American side in Arizona is so developed, and one on the Mexican side is not. And they share language, they share everything, the people are the same. But why? Because politics, America is more of a democratic country than Mexico is. So there is a direct relationship between the way of life of the people and the politics. So no one should tell you that there is not. So people can equate their problems, people can relate their problems to the leadership, and rightly so. So every time someone has nothing to do, have nothing to return to, they are willing to do everything. And people in government, people in the state, I see President Museveni saying, securing your future. Which future? Because these guys have no future to look to. You are promising to secure their future. Which future are you telling them? They can't relate your message to what is happening to them. What future are you talking about? So they don't see a future. So even if you don't die because of a bullet, you die because of something else. So they are willing to do everything. And they are not actually even demonstrating because of Chaguranyi. Because Chaguranyi has always been around here. But Chaguranyi is the representative of their problem. He's a representative, and if Chaguranyi goes, tomorrow there will be another person, as there has been others before Chaguranyi came. So trying to curtail Chaguranyi, trying to hit him politically, thinking that you are solving the problem, you are not, because he is just the representative of those problems. And I think people who are running the state, President Museveni should be knowing better in this, because he went to the bush and told us that he properly diagnosed Uganda's problem. And he said, before you deal with any problem, you have to fix the politics. And he went to the bush. He convinced a lot of people who are at Makerere University, who are doctors, what have you, they went with him to go and fix the politics. The others will follow. So it is extremely important to first fix the politics before you look at the others. And for as long as they continue hiding their heads in the sand and thinking that when you crush Chaguranyi, the problem has ended, it has not. I've been reading a story today about Ethiopia, the Tigray problem, the fighting in the Tigray. They're trying to fight back because they were in power for 30 years, and people's problems had not been solved yet. They had gone into a protracted civil war thinking that they were going to solve this problem, and they did not. So they overthrew that government, and there is another government now. And now those who lost power are trying to fight back. So issue is, those in power think that when they look at Sudan, when they look at other areas, even let's look at Black Africa, when they look at Burkina Faso, they think that what happened in Burkina Faso can't happen here. Others, even in where it has happened, they also thought it can't happen here. So, but every time the anger keeps on mounting, and I can assure you, there is no, President Museveni says they have gone in the territory, you understand. There is no one who is the master of violence. President Museveni himself had by the time they entered here, they had an army of 7,000 people. They were defeating an army of about 40,000 men. You know, so it doesn't matter whether you claim you are the source of, you are the master of this. When there is violence, it consumes everybody. The last one, Raymond. I know one, the government official was coming from, is it Nakasongola or Guru, wherever he was coming from. And they were held up in Ruel for hours because they couldn't access the road. And they had guards. So when the country breaks down, even you who claims to be the master of this, they have gone in the territory, you understand. I am telling you, no one is safe. Then they killed people in Kayunga, the NRM caucus went and met Museveni. And they were held up for 6 hours in the State House. They couldn't come to Kampala. And the president was like, should I give them, each of them, an escort, SFC? It wasn't working until night around maybe midnight when the thing had cooled down. So there is no winner in where there is violence. So I would really appeal to President Museveni that we have been here, and that's the reason we are having you. So if we have been here, we don't want to see it again. You know, those ones who killed, now 60 families are looking at 60 empty chairs. Now, as I speak to you this evening, 60 families and counting are looking at empty chairs. And I don't know, what are you going to tell those families? That I am securing your future. Which future now are you securing? So we know for a fact, lastly, that I am not an optimist like many of you, that this election will come in 2016, in 21, on January 14th. And on January 16th, Biabakama, Simon Mugenyi, we will declare Yoweri Kaguta Museveni as the president of Uganda. I can assure you that. There is no doubt. The person who has killed, who has rammed into parliament to ram through an amendment is not a person you can defeat in an election. So if we all know that that is going to happen, why must it happen with 100 Ugandans dead?
Only.
You know?
Yes, thanks so much, Becca. Agatha, very finally, what should be the kind of coverage moving forward in this coming week on particularly this protest, riots, and arrest of candidates?
No, I really advocate for balanced, fair coverage. As journalists, we might want to comfort the afflicted, but also let's not cover their wrongs, which is why I would think that any journalist with the resources and the time to do so should go and find out what sparked the first bullet, in as far as it can be ascertained. Was there a rioter that pelted the police? Was there so that at the end of the day we dissect and interrogate this view that it's the hooligans that are leading to this. It's the police has to protect itself and the people, but also looking at the candidates, the presidential candidates. President Museveni has at least been an example in not having crowds, if that's what it's causing this, but we know it's not. Yes, him as a person, although
but he fears COVID because that's why everyone who goes to his campaign must test. So he's not having the crowds because he's following the SOP.
He's not doing it for us.
Yes,
he's doing
for
it
him.
for himself.
Yes.
But let Chagulanyi also do it for himself. Everyone should fear COVID. Let General Muntu do it for himself. Although I don't know how practical that can be. That will you tell people that whoever beyond 200, I'm not going to allow people in. But you've gone there to sell yourself to those people. But anyway, like, since they agreed to participate in an abnormal election, maybe they should go an extra mile to make sure that the disease is not, the virus is not further spread. But us as journalists, let's look at that. Let's hold them to account. If I am interviewing Honorable Chagulanyi, I would say, as a leader, how do you have 10,000, a crowd of 10,000 in times like this? But at the end of the day, let's speak the truth. Because like I said earlier, I am not going to concentrate on a rioter who is angry at this government, who has thrown a stone, more than an armed, trained policeman and trained to protect this rioter and others who shoots that rioter, or even a person passing by who's not even rioting. So I think we should hold this police to account in as far as we can. We have sat here before and said we can't do anything. We can't hold anyone to account. We really lie to ourselves. But let's sensitize Ugandans to what is happening exactly, to the police that we pay as Ugandans and what they are doing. Let's do our part and let's leave the rest to...
All right. Thank you so much, Agatha. Thank you so much, Becca, for making time for us. This has been the Fourth Estate. We naturally discuss the stories that have come through the week, and we try and hammer them out and see what did we miss, which part did we get right, what do we do in the coming week. And of course, we will be back again next Sunday covering, we hope, a more joyful story than what we've been discussing today. Have yourselves a good evening.